It's April 27th, and the strange side of history awaits. Today, we have a dictator caught before he could disappear, survivors lost in a sudden explosion, and workers falling in an instant. Let's begin. On April 27, 1945, as Nazi Germany collapsed and the Allied forces closed in, Benito Mussolini made one final attempt to disappear. He wasn't dressed like a dictator anymore. Hidden beneath a German helmet and a Luftwaffe coat, he sat silently inside a convoy of retreating soldiers, moving north along the cold edge of Lake Como. His plan was simple: cross into Switzerland and vanish. At a small village called Dongo, the convoy was stopped. One by one, the soldiers were inspected, faces checked, and papers demanded. Tension hung in the air, and then someone looked closer. Despite his disguise, Mussolini was recognized. Pulled from the vehicle, the man who once ruled Italy stood exposed, surrounded by enemies. His escape was over before it truly began. By the next day, he and his mistress were taken to a small village nearby, and there, without ceremony, they were executed. On April 29th, their bodies were brought to Milan, to a square where fascists once had executed resistant fighters. This time, the crowd gathered for a different reason. The bodies were beaten, desecrated, and hung upside down from the gas station roof, in a grim final message. Even in death, the story refused to rest. His body was buried in secrecy, stolen, hidden again, only to resurface years later. On April 27, 1865, just weeks after the end of the American Civil War, a crowded steamboat named the Sultana pushed north along the Mississippi River. On board were the survivors, Union soldiers newly freed from the Confederate prison camps, starved, sick, and barely alive. Finally, able to go home. But the ship was never meant to carry them. It was built for a few hundred, and the Sultana was packed with over 2,000 men, crammed shoulder to shoulder across the wooden deck. The boilers had already been failing, patched quickly, carelessly, just enough to keep moving. And then around 2 a.m., near Memphis, it happened. A blast tore through the center of the ship. 3 of the 4 boilers exploded at once. The deck collapsed, fire spread instantly, and in seconds, the Sultana became a burning wreck drifting in the night. Men were thrown into the freezing river, some burnt alive, others clinging to the debris in silence. A few survived long enough to be pulled from the water by nearby boats and civilians on the shore, but most never made it. Between 1,100 and 1,800 people died that night, more than the Titanic. And yet, almost no one remembers it, because earlier, Abraham Lincoln had been assassinated, and the nation was already grieving something else. Imagine surviving a war, prison, starvation, only to die a few hours before reaching home. On April 27, 1978, before the sun had fully risen over West Virginia, 51 men were already high above the ground, working inside the massive cooling towers of Pleasant's power station. They were standing on a circular scaffolding suspended more than 160 feet in the air. Below them, nothing but open space. Above them, unfinished concrete, still fresh, still curing. But the work couldn't wait. The structure had been poured hours earlier, far too soon to hold its own weight. The supports weren't fully secured, and some anchor bolts were missing entirely. Yet, the construction continued. Then, something shifted. A low creak echoed through the tower. The entire ring of metal and wood began to peel away from the wall. For a split second, everything hung in place, and then it collapsed. The entire structure fell inward, dragging the men down with it. All 51 workers were killed, an entire workforce gone in seconds. Investigators later found the cause: the concrete hadn't cured. It was never strong enough to hold what was placed on it. No one was criminally charged, and no one was held fully responsible. But the years that followed, safety rules were rewritten because of what happened inside that tower. Another day, another strange bite from history. Like, comment, and subscribe. Your next eerie dose is just a day away.